Welcome to the Strength of Knowledge podcast. I'm Marshall Bennett. We're the three best friends there ever was. Today, we're going to talk about advice we would give other coaches and ourselves back in the day, which for me was a long time ago. For you guys, it was like last year. So, to get us started, like always, Aaron Letinsky, let's get it.
All right, let's go ahead. We'll start off. So, Marshall, how was World War II?
You're so
Like,
old.
give us any advice? Like, are you gonna do some war stories? What you used to do, or what?
Are you editing this out too, or we're
No,
going to
we're
keep?
leaving this. And yeah, this is what I have the sense of humor. I'm the funny guy. All right, so we'll go
All right, go
ahead.
Marsh.
No, I'm going.
No, go Aaron.
Yes, go where? To World War II. All right, so the three things I think I would like to know before I got into the coaching and kind of get into the strength conditioning was number one, I mean, you're going to make mistakes no matter what, and it's okay. I've been at places where a lot of the coaches would let you know that you made mistakes, and a lot of them didn't tell you the nicest way, and that's just how it is. And that's at the end of the day. Now looking back at it, how much of a better coach I am is because I had to live up to those expectations. Realize, hey, even though at the end of the day I know I'm going to make some mistakes, small mistakes, but it's going to be how I am able to just keep going and keep going, and not let that mistake keep getting into other mistakes. And like I said, those coaches who held me up to that standard at the time, it's like, dude, they're yelling at me. It's like, oh my gosh, no one liked to be yelled at. But like I said, at the end of the day, like now thinking about it, being a little older, it's like, wow, I was able to learn a lot from them because like they kept that standard all the time. And it was not just for athletes, it was also for the coaches or the people they're working with. So that was like something what I kind of took away from that. And like I said, making mistakes, everybody mistakes. I make mistakes daily. I mean, I still do make mistakes. It's just what I'm going to keep learning from those mistakes. But I guess for that young Aaron, I wish I would have not kicked myself so hard at those mistakes, because at the end of the day, like I said, you're going to make those mistakes. Maybe I didn't kick myself as hard, but where I am now is because I made those mistakes and I was able to fix those mistakes and understand where now I made that mistake. Now I'm not going to make that mistake in the future. So, second point was just trust. Trust it'll all work out. We've all had interviews. We all wish we could have got this job. We all wish we could have got that interview, and we end up not getting it. And like I said, there's a lot of times I've wanted that job, I wanted that interview, I wanted that position, end up not getting it, even though I felt like, hey, I had a good interview, I had this, I had that. Because at the end of the day, all I can do is kind of just can't control it. So you kind of just let it go and just go with the flow, because all these stops that I've been at, even though I wanted that other place at the time, I'm so thankful what I've been at every place I've been at, because I've been able to learn so much. And it could have been a different route if I was to get that interview, if I was in to get that other job what I wanted. I just don't know where I would be if I was to get that job what I wanted, or that interview what I wanted. So at the end of the day, I'm very thankful of how my life turned out and where I'm at right now. Then the third one is just be okay with moving. I'm not as old as Marshall, as we joked around, but I lived in New York, Indiana, Ohio, from Michigan, Iowa, Illinois, and that was probably all within what, 4.5 years, 5 years. So I've been able to move a lot, and it's okay. Marshall will touch on it with the relationship. It's not the easiest, but just be okay to move. And if that's something what you're willing to do, I think you can go as far as you want in this profession. And I think those are the three things I'd like to know before I got into strength conditioning. Sam, hit me with some knowledge.
My turn.
Yes, sir.
All right. The first one is somewhat similar in that it takes some parts from a little bit what Aaron said, where my first point is understanding exactly what you're getting into, coaching in general, and each specific step that you go through, where with coaching, you're going to have a lot of things like travel, like Aaron said, and you're going to have long hours. You're going to have, battling with burnout sometimes. If you're working, you get into the office at 4 a.m., you're leaving at 8:30 p.m., sometimes like that. Maybe you're not going to be able to catch up on sleep, being able to take care of yourself in that way, and understanding every like detail that you really need to understand, that you need to know. Like with the coach that you're going to be working under, what's their style? What are their expectations of you? Are you going to have any limitations in how you do things? Are you going to be expected to learn as you go? Or are you going to be expected to kind of adapt to their style and bring that into how you coach? Being able to kind of understand exactly what's going to be expected of you in each position that you get to is going to be huge, because it's going to allow you to understand what you do and what you don't do as a coach in that position. Moving into that, my second point is pretty subjective, where I say understand what makes a good coach. And it's a difficult one because just as many different strength coaches there are going to be just as many different answers for what makes a good coach. Do you get along with the athletes really well? Do you get along with the sport coaches really well? Do you coach well on the floor? Are you willing to travel with the team, or would you rather stay back, and if there are extra, different circumstances, understanding what makes a good coach, your knowledge base, there's so many different things surrounding it. Having an idea of exactly what you think can make you a good coach or a better coach, and just pounding that in and making sure you stay true to that the entire time throughout the process. My third point would be to be open minded. Be open minded, but be grounded in science and logic and things that make sense. You're going to see some things that you may not understand, and you're going to see some things that you frankly don't know what's going on and stuff like that. Like, don't be afraid to ask questions, and but understand that you should study hard enough to be able to see something that a bigger coach is doing, or at a bigger school or a different institution or something, and have a good enough knowledge base to be able to understand why they're doing what they're doing. Not copying what they do blindly just because you saw something cool on the internet. Being able to back up what you program for your athletes, because I think it's one of the biggest things is, if you can't explain why you're going to do something as a coach, then don't do it. Stay away from that for now until you can at least have a reasonable and logical explanation for why you would do it. If you don't have an answer for it, then you probably shouldn't be doing it. And then that kind of plays into having conversations with a lot of other coaches. I've learned a lot from everyone that I've talked to, whether it's Aaron and Marshall working together, being able to talk to each other, talk shop, talk outside of the weight room, being able to gather ourselves in our lives and stuff like that. Having conversations with other people and other coaches is huge, because you're going to be able to understand so much more. It's going to widen or broaden your horizons. It's going to keep that mind open with that base and knowledge that you should have from before. I have a little bonus one on the side, and it's going to be just making sure you do the right thing. Everyone knows right from wrong, what we do, what we don't do. So it's going to be more of, you're going to face difficult situations more regularly than you might think, where it might be difficult conversations with a sport coach, difficult conversations with a coworker, with a boss, with other people, administration. And you have to be able to understand what's right and what's wrong. If a sport coach decides, like, I want you to go and run our kids because they didn't have good practice, and I want you to run them until they're tired or something, that's not the right thing to do. If there are things like that where it has to be in your knowledge base to be able to say, hey, we wouldn't do this because XYZ. I'm going to have that conversation with the sport coach and say, I'm not going to do that because I'm not going to have them run 30 sprints in 5 minutes because after like 3 reps, they're going to be jogging and then they're practicing running slow. And then take the conversation that goes from there. But make sure you stay firm with doing what's actually right and not just what other people want you to do. It covers it for me. Marsh, hit
I'll
us.
piggyback on Sam.
Oof.
All he mentioned about the asking questions, a lot of the people, even when I was young, like emailing out to, well, that was young, like a couple years ago, Marsh, about 20, 30 years ago for you. But just emailing out to people, reaching out now, Twitter, Instagram's so big. That wasn't really big when I was in, coming up from college. Marshall, did you even have a phone back in high school or something?
They're
No,
phone.
they use
not.
smoke
I
signals.
don't even know what a flip phone or T.
When did you have a razor? Like kindergarten?
When he was
I
4, he
know.
was having his midlife crisis when he got a razor.
Your razor.
Well,
But
no,
at the end of
that's
the day, there's a lot of people who like are willing to help. There's willing to ask questions. Don't be afraid to blindly shoot that email, blindly shoot a DM, blindly just, and it's not being like, and asking that question, be like, hey, coach, why are you doing this? Or one of my favorite questions was always like, hey, what are 3 books, what you've read, what you liked? As my previous episode was about me reading books, that was like one of my first couple of questions I've always asked coaches was, hey, what are the 2, 3 books, what you would recommend? What are the strength conditioning? What's outside of the strength conditioning? That was a couple of the questions I've always had, like when I was in college and undergrad, reaching out to a couple of coaches who I thought I liked their stuff. I was following them and I shot them an email. But as Sam said, always ask questions and don't be afraid to reach out because from my knowledge and my experience, like this field's always, they want to help people. There's not many times I never got an email response back. If I even did, I don't think I ever not got an email response. So that was.
well, yeah, and that ties right into it where I think that I've learned more from just having conversations with people that I work with, people who are smarter than me is the key point. I make sure that I know who knows more than me. I know what I know what I don't know. So I'm going to talk to someone about something I don't know because they might know it better than me. I've learned way more about from talking to people and talking to people that I've worked with for sure than I have from reading and videos and stuff like that, because you might not get every detail that you need in the book, in the video, in the podcast, stuff like that, where having that actual conversation, sitting down and talking with someone can be huge for learning about things that you may not have even considered before.
Yeah. And I guess I'll give a bonus for Marshall. Put a bar on your back and squat. That'll teach you a lot about the weight room too. Go ahead, Marshall.
I mean, just to add briefly to your guys' 2 things. I think strength coaches are always an open book. Like during Coaches versus COVID, Tommy Moffitt was talking about his programming with his athletes, and I wanted a little bit more clarity on like exactly what he was talking about. So I reached out, sent him an email, and we had 8 email exchange talking about exactly what he was doing with his athletes and stuff like that. And that's a team at the time that just came off winning the national championship. So literally any strength coach from the bottom to the top is willing to help anybody in this industry, which I think is huge. Which kind of brings me up to my first point is going to be about relationships, and relationships go 2 ways in this facility, in this industry. I'm married now, luckily, and it wasn't an easy route. I've been in strength and conditioning for about 6 years. I've been with my wife Jana for 7 years, and there was times where when I was an intern at Washington, we lived apart for 7 months. It wasn't as tough as some people might think, but you have to have that good line of communication. You have to talk all the time. Aaron and I have talked about it. Sam's going through it with his girlfriend right now, and it's a tough thing to go through. And the hardest part was probably when I was in Iowa. I just engaged, or I proposed to her, and then a month later I got accepted into getting a master's program So I left for Iowa for a year and a half. She went back home to Wyoming to save up for our wedding. And, you know, that was the toughest year and a half of our relationship for sure, just because, you know, I left her to plan everything while I'm working, you know, 14 hours a day trying to get my career going. And, you know, again, comes down to communication, trying to talk to each other as much as possible. It's hard because you're going to have to ask your significant other to sacrifice a lot for you to benefit in this industry. And it's not right, but that's the way it is right now. And that's how it goes. Like Aaron and Sam talked about, like, you know, you got to go all over the place. You know, I was in Wyoming, I was in Washington, I was in Colorado, I was in Iowa, now I'm in Texas. You know, it goes all over. With relationships too, I think networking is a huge deal. So reaching out to those coaches, like you guys both previously mentioned, is a big thing, and keeping those relationships. You know, you just got to check in with coaches that you've worked with in the past, even if it's a brief interaction. You know, I went out to Weber State when I was in Wyoming in between jobs, and just to check out the coach and, you know, meet and talk shop and check out everything. And it was one of the best things I've done, because me and him have a pretty good relationship now. And if I didn't reach out to him to see if I can come by and just talk shop, nothing would have ever, you know, came to fruition from that. So um, the second thing I think is really understanding kind of the roles and getting into positions. Like when I first started, I did a shadow with the University of Wyoming, where honestly, and this isn't a knock on anybody or a school or anything, I just didn't learn anything. You know, I'm standing in the corner watching how things flow and getting a good feel of like what goes on in the weight room, but not understanding or learning, you know, coaching cues and exercises on why we're doing this, why we're doing that. I say that, but you know, Coach Cotterman, he's the director of strength and conditioning out there. And, you know, I talk to him a lot now, and I talked to him a lot back then, trying to learn and kind of get a better understanding. I say I didn't learn a lot because when I went to the University of Washington, I was terrible. I didn't know anything. I really don't think I did a good job there, but I showed up on time every single day, never missed a day, and, you know, worked 12, 13 hours a day every single day. I have pretty good relationships with all those coaches, but you know, it's the grind that we always have to put in. We have to put in that time, and it's unfortunate part of this industry, but it is there, and it's going to fall back on all those relationships that you have as well. And then don't do it for the paycheck. I mean, there's a small percentage of coaches that get those big salaries that people see and they're like, oh man, you know, I want to get that. I want to make that money. And yeah, money is great. Money is nice, but most of the people in this industry are not making that. And, you know, understanding your value. You know, when I was at Air Force, I was probably there for a little bit too long, just holding on, waiting and hoping for a full-time position when nothing was really falling along the lines of going to happen. Right. Cause, you know, certification wise, I wasn't really kicking butt in that department. I didn't have my master's yet, and I was working my butt off, but you know, that's just kind of the work ethic I've always had in my life. You know, I always want to do the best I can for whoever I'm working for. So at the time, it was like, you know, if I keep working my ass off, I'm going to get a chance here. I'm going to be here. You know, don't get stuck in those positions where you want something so bad you don't want to leave, because you need to do what's best for you, your family, and your career moving forward. So don't be afraid to walk away from something that you think is so amazing, so great, because you don't know what's on the other side, for one. And for two, you got to keep trying to progress yourself in this industry, which nothing's ever guaranteed. You can do everything exactly right. You got your master's, you got all these certifications, you've worked all these hours, you really kicked ass. And then at the end of the road, there's nothing there waiting for you. You know, so that goes back to, you know, there's a new grind, right? You're not waiting for something new. You got to deal with what's going on. Those are the three I think I would really tell myself. You know, you got to go into this for the love of strength and conditioning and not for the love of money or anything else, because if you want to do this, it's going to be all about, you know, building relationships with athletes and making sure that you're trying to promote them the best that you can. You do a very small percent of what is going on. You're there for a small period of time. The athlete has to do everything else. They have to do the training. They have to sleep well. They have to drink water. They have to take care of their bodies, do recovery and all those sort of things. So you do a small part of their body, but trying to help them along the way is huge. So I think the one big thing that I have advice for coaches, I would say, is, they aren't your athletes. You're helping them out along their journey, but you don't claim that, hey man, I trained this guy. That was me. Nobody cares what you had to say or what you programmed or what you did for them. Hopefully, knock on wood, they stay healthy. I think that's the biggest thing that we do. Some people might not agree, but I think we're here to make sure that people stay healthy in this industry and in sport and everything like that. So, I mean, that's my advice for everybody.
Can I piggyback off you real quick, Marsh?
All right, Sam.
Because there are a couple little like sub points that I'd like to kind of maybe elaborate on with what you said. I'm trying to not be too controversial when I say about the money. It's not about the money. Don't ever think it is. You're not gonna like only like 4 coaches are gonna make over X amount, whatever. But you also have to be able to make enough to survive. And
Right.
and that's the goal, is to be able to help you support yourself as a human being, and then hopefully your family also with that. So it's not about the money, but it also kind of is, where you can't just sit in the same spot. You can't, hang out with a master's and however many years and make $600 a month, because that's going to get you just into the ground, right? And it kind of goes into taking care of yourself. You're not going to be able to take care of anyone if you can't take care of yourself. If your athletes are going to be, busting their butts and having people like demand everything of them for all 24 hours of every single day, you're going to be putting in almost maybe just as much work getting ready for that, being able to understand what they're going through. But you also have to turn it back on yourself and say, hey, like, I got 4 hours of sleep the last 3 nights. Maybe I have to attempt to find some time where I can like sneak back and take a nap, or find some way to be able to take care of yourself. Because if you're no good, then you're not going to give anything to your athletes, and then everyone's just kind of spinning their wheels. And a little bit, I don't know if I'm going to try to phrase this right. When they're not your athletes, you're right, they're definitely not your athletes, but being able to understand what is beneficial and what may take it a little bit too far, that'll break them down too much, right? Sometimes, I at least in my experiences, I've had like sport coaches ask me, hey, like, they just didn't work hard enough today. They just didn't do this today, or they didn't do that. Like, they're not sweating enough. And I have to be able to sit down and have that conversation. It's not, don't measure it in sweat. You don't want them to be driven into the ground. Like, it's a difficult balance, but I think that's kind of where you're getting at with their staying away from injury, preventing injury, keeping them healthy. A lot of that can come in training. Your training can build athletes up and make them bigger, stronger, faster, but it can also break them down to the point where they're not able to give 100% on the field of play anymore. And you have to be really careful about that balance, where yes, maybe you have to compromise some stuff with your sport coach, and you have to say, yeah, sure, we'll do that, but we can't do it to that extent, because at that point we're just going to break them down too much, and then they're going to be slower. They're going to jump less high. They're going to, they're just going to feel bad. And so it's kind of like the same thing as like the taking out the 2-a-days for football. If you're not letting your athletes recover, and they're not being taken care of on that side, then it defeats the purpose of whatever we do, right? If we want them to come in, we have a set plan going, throughout months and years, or sometimes with these athletes. And then we don't take into consideration the intensity of their practices or the intensity of their class at work or something like that, and how much stress that's going to put on them, then we're doing them a disservice of asking them to do too much too soon or at the wrong time, right? I'm sorry, that's just why I wanted to chime in with.
I think I'd add to that too, Sam, is like, I think the big thing that you brought up is stress. And I think a young coach, looking back at like myself, I didn't really, account for that. Like, you're just like, I made the program, this is what we're going to do. No ifs, ands, or buts, being the hard ass strength coach that people like to see and people like to, emulate or whatever. But like, you don't know what other stressors are going on in their life. It could be, life, family, whatever's going on in that realm. They could have school, they could not sleep well, they could have relationship issues. Like, there's so many factors that go into an athlete that we have to consider, because not only are we trying to prevent injury and stuff like that, but their mental health and their physical health is very important. We got to help, I don't want to say, we're the father, but we got to help out athletes the best way we can. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Why'd you
Yeah.
smile? I saw you smile.
No.
Aaron,
I wasn't smiling. I was smiling because
all I see is Sam's face.
He's a weirdo. But as you said, Marshall, it's that fine line, You want to hold people accountable. You have a standard, but at the end of the day, like you said, just communicating with athletes and kind of just knowing when an athlete's off, usually maybe an athlete's positive, he's always dancing, he's jumping around, talking to you, and then the next day he comes in and he's not saying that much. And yes, you have that standard, you have that expectations, you want to hold them accountable, but maybe it's that 5-minute talk of, hey, come here, like, what's up? Like, sleep good, eat good, anything matter? And, kind of get into that athlete a little more. And eventually, that might not help that training session, but I feel like that'll build that relationship with that athlete for next training session. And, it's very hard for me because at the end of the day, yes, coming from a college to a high school, I have the expectation. I have standards. I've always wanted a weight room to be very positive. I always wanted the weight room to be high energy. I want the weight room to be fun. I want to be a positive place for people to want to come. People want to have fun in. But then again, it's like I have standards. I have these expectations where it's like, if we're not meeting these, like, hey, let's go. Like, what are we doing? So it's kind of that tough balance of, yes, you have standards, have expectations. You want to get this done. You need to get this done. But it's also that I need to talk to my athletes and communicate them as best I can, because, like you said, the stress, I don't know what's going on in their lives. I don't know what's going on in their home lives. I don't know what they're doing in other classes. I don't know stress. Maybe their girlfriend or boyfriend just broke up with them. Maybe a pet just died. There's so much what I don't know. But as a coach, you're starting to kind of key on if it's that body language or just that communication. You talk to them and they're looking down and just mumbling. But like you said, it's really tough, and that's something I've been really working on, especially this year, coming back to high school. Because, like I said, there is stuff I want to do. There's stuff I want to have set in stone, but it's like sometimes, even though it's set in stone, it should have been written in pencil, because I'm erasing it because it's going to be different from athlete to athlete, class to class.
Yeah, and that gets into kind of like some of the things that hopefully coaches just inherently learn and develop while they're coaching and while they're getting used to their athletes and their program and stuff like that. Being able to build that connection is one of the skills that make a coach one of the kind of supporting pillars in an athlete's daily routine, where we may see them more often than their sport coaches do. So sometimes a sport coach might come up and say, hey, I've seen so-and-so might be slowing down. How have they been in the weight room? And you can kind of give them that feedback, say, hey, they're having a tough time. Their classes are kind of, a little bit tougher than they thought, or something like that, where we're able to have that communication and build the relationship with our athletes to be able to look out for them a little bit more.
I think that's key. And The one thing I forgot to mention in the beginning of the podcast was people that are still listening to this point, whoever that may be, feel free to give us more comments and suggestions and stuff like that. We love the feedback. People were talking and complaining about my bed not being made. This bitch is made. We're good to go. No complaints on that side of
Did
things.
Jana make it or did you make it?
It doesn't matter. Somebody did. So please keep the comments coming, and please follow us on Instagram, Twitter, and thanks for everybody. Hope you guys enjoyed the show.